Peace for all. Okay, so the piece we're going to learn today from the Misma'el and also a parallel piece from the Siva Shalom. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Once again, mentioning Shabir Fu Shalema for Yosef Alexander Zusha ben Sarah, who's waiting now for an operation on his broken leg, and may it all be well. Okay, so instead of, like I say, going on a piece that's on Parshas Devarim itself, the Misma'el spoke, probably in one of the years like this one, about the unique Shabbos that comes when Tisha B'av comes out on Shabbos. Okay, when Tisha B'av comes out on Shabbos, in the Hasidic Devarim, that is the highest of the Shabbos of the year. Meaning, even on deep dark Tisha B'av, that gets pushed to the side. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, come sit down, have a l'chaim, have some meat, have some cholent, sing, let's be together. It's the most powerful statement of the eternal connection that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that there is. But let's see in the depth how it works. The Gemara Maseches Megillah says that Rabbi Bikesh Lakor Tisha B'av Lo Hodulo. It says Rabbi Yehuda Anossi wanted to cancel Tisha B'av, and the Chachamim didn't agree to that. So Amar Lefanav Rabbi Bar Zavda, Rabbi Bar Zavda said to Rabbi Chanina, says Rebbe Lokacha Yomaisa. It wasn't that he wanted to cancel Tisha B'av entirely. Ela Tisha B'av shecholios b'Shabbos hava. That year it was a Tisha B'av that came out on Shabbos. V'dochinu la'achar Shabbos. So the psak was, as we do, to be doche, to defer the Tisha B'av and to fulfill it on Sunday, right? But Rebbe said, V'amar Rebbe, ho'el v'nidche yidche. It was pushed away. It ain't Tisha B'av anymore, right? It's gone. The Chacham didn't agree to him, and that's what we have L'maisa now, as we will be seeing again. Hopefully, it should be the Yom Tov of Tisha B'av. If you look up online, Dr. A.J. Chorsky, Rabbi Chorsky, that's how made a song about the Yom Tov of Tisha B'av, about what it's going to be like on the Yom Tov. Okay, so the Misma'el says we have to try to understand their argument. Obviously, Rebbe wasn't flippant, trying to say, okay, it was the 9th of Av, we couldn't fast, let's just drop it. Right? What do you have to make people suffer for? He says, this is what I heard from my father, Avnei Nezer, about how fast days work in general. And this is based on something from the Chosev Lublin, on the Pasuk, in Sefer Nochum, Lo tokum pa'amayim tzara. A tzara doesn't come twice. What does that mean? He says, Ki kol hanisim shenasu Yisrael, every nes, every positive miracle that happened to Am Yisrael, nase roshem ba'oso zman. That leaves an impression on the coordinates in time when it happened. That's the root of our moedim. A moed means that something happened at a certain point in time, and because of that, it transformed that point in time, and every time we return there, the light that came into the world is accessible again. It's still there. Okay, that is what happens on Pesach. On Leila Seder, you're able to access what happened on the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim because of the Roshim, the impression that was left at that time. And so at the other Moedim. Achat tzaros, but bad things that happened, Rachmana litzlan, lo nisha mehem Roshim bisman. Happened at Tzara, okay, it had to happen. That doesn't leave an impression in time, right? That doesn't leave something which is there that lasts. V'zeh lo tokum pamayim tzara. That's what the Navi says, that a tzara doesn't come twice, right? The tzara doesn't, it came, it happened, it had to happen, it's gone, there's nothing left. Now wait a second. He says, L'fi zeh tzarich lehavin ma'u inyanat somos shebekol shana b'zman hazeh. What is the idea that we have a fast day on the same day that negative things happened? When you look in the Kinnis, it points out all the things that happened on Tisha B'av. And they point out continuing in history, the expulsion from Spain on Tisha B'av. Some very critical event that led to the World War I was also on Tisha B'av. I forget if it was that assassination of that, whoever it was, and the Duke there, or something. So people track it throughout history. But here, Avnei Nezer tells us, based on the Pasuk in Nachum, there was no impression left when something bad happened, so why are we fasting? Why is this night different than all other nights, that we should be fasting on it? So he says, that's because we don't realize the true nature of a tzara. He says, Yesh loma. The answer is, Hine ozbos and atzaros notel Yisrael hafuch al kol avonaseihem. Why did the tzara come into the world? it was there to reverse the damage that was done by the avonos of Am Yisrael. And why did Hashem want to reverse the damage done by the avonos of Am Yisrael? Because avonos distance us from Hashem, and He wanted to draw us close. Okay, He says atzaros were for kaparas avon till they were nirtzim lavim shebashamayim. Hashem says, okay, you got your patch. Now come back. Right? Now we're close again. This is why Chazal said in the mysterious Gemara in Maseches Yuma, shenichnesu nachrim lehechal, when the nachrim came into the Kodesh Kodashim, they saw, right, on the kapares, the kruvim were embracing, like man and wife. And the question is, the Gemara tells us in other places that the kruvim reflected the relationship between Am Yisrael and Hashem. It says if we were as we should be, the kruvim would be facing each other. If we weren't, they would be facing away. So here, this should be the time that our relationship was at the most negative point, that we had behaved so badly that we lost the right to have the Beis Hamikdash here with us in the world. And the Kruvim were not just facing each other, they were embracing. He says, why? He says, because that was a time of ritzui, of making up, of bringing back. By the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, Hashem says, okay, this had to happen because we have to get together. And that's the point of the entire exercise. V'ritzui zeh, and that appeasement, so to speak, that's what left a Roshim on Tisha B'av and Shivasar B'Tammuz and all those days. And he says, that's what we are supposed to access. We're supposed to access the light of that love and that drawing close. But he says, when spiritual lights come down from heaven, so to speak, you can't access it, you can't absorb it, you can't do anything with it. You need something, it's coming into our world, the Olam HaMaisa, you need Maisa to be the Kli, to be the vessel that can absorb those auras and let you access them. For example, he says the Neshama. The neshama is something spiritual that comes from above. It cannot be a resident of this world without a goof to go into. So he says, therefore Chazal made fast days. The fast day is a physical maisa, which is a kli to receive what? The ritzui, the oros of ritzui, the light of which Hashem sent, of how He wants us back and He wants us to be close to Him. That's what's happening there. Okay, me'ein oz shatzaros hayu kelim l'ritzui. Just like those tzaros came into the world, and the tzara itself was the kli. The destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was a physical action. What was it? Its internal content? Love. Its internal content was drawing close. This is what he said. My father said, Ad kan dvar v'kadoshim, again quoting the Chazor of Lublin. Now, he says, light without kelim, he says, comes in on Shabbos. Shabbos is what's called kaviyah v'kaima. We don't make Shabbos. Shabbos is there. We can connect with Shabbos, but Shabbos is always there. And therefore he says, the light of Shabbos is there without any kelim. Again, quoting his father, says, why is it that the Binyan Beis HaMikdash is not Doche Shabbos? Right? The Torah states that explicitly. Right, in Kisisa, after the mitzvah of the Beis Hamikdash, it says, Achas Shabbos tishmaru, you have to keep my Shabbos, meaning even though you would think there's a positive mitzvah here to build the Beis Hamikdash, and sometimes a positive mitzvah, Eses Dochel Osase, the one that we see in action nowadays, if there's a bris milah on the 8th day, and the 8th day of Shabbos, we do the bris milah, right, even though involve those things. So why shouldn't the Beis Hamikdash be Doche Shabbos? He says, because the Beis Hamikdash is meant to be a kli for the Hashras HaShechina, for the Shechina to be there among us. And on Shabbos, you don't need a kli. On Shabbos, the Shechina is among us without any kelim at all. He says that's why we don't wear tefillin on Shabbos. That's the quote from his father. So he says, this is why Rebbe wanted to cancel the Tisha B'av that came out on Shabbos. He said, listen, it came out on Shabbos, because he says, the reason you don't have to fast on Shabbos is because even though the tainus is the way we access that ritzui, that love and closeness with Hashem, he says on Shabbos, You don't need the tainus to access that. Right? He says you can do that without a kli. That's the whole difference of Shabbos. That Shabbos is a day in which you can access these things without a kli. So we did it on Shabbos. On that Shabbos, which is Tisha B'av, we access all of the love and all of the light and all of the internal content of the events of Tisha B'av without having to fast. So Rebbe said, why should they fast? Okay, that's what he meant when he said, Ho'el v'nidche yidche. Right? It wasn't just saying, oh, come on, don't make them fast, right? They got out of it this year, let them have a break. He said, no. He says, it's been done. Now, why didn't the Chachamim agree to him? He says, because there's a difference between the Neshama Yisera of Shabbos and the Neshama Yisera of Yom Tov. Okay? There's a concept of the Neshama Yisera. There's an extra aspect of our Neshama which becomes resident in us, so to speak, on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. But he says, on Shabbos, it leaves on Motzai Shabbos. Right? That's all these different things of Havdalah and the Besomim. But he says, the Neshama of Yisera of Yom Tov remains with us. Why? Again, quoting his father, Davnei Nezer, says, since Shabbos is nothing that we have a hand in making, it's Kaviyah V'Kaima, so Hashem has his Shabbos in the world. It's there. We're able to be in it, involved in it, and then it leaves. It's gone. He says, but Yom Tov, right, that is Eila Moadei Hashem Asher Tikra Oisam B'Moadim. You declare when the Moed is. Beis Din is the one that declares with the Kiddush HaChodesh when the Yom Tov is going to be. So therefore, he says, since we had a hand in bringing that into the world, the Neshama Yisrael of Yom Tov doesn't leave us. Okay? He says, the Ramban says that's why we don't make Besamim on Matzoi Yom Tov, because the Neshama Yisera of Yom Tov doesn't leave. The Besamim on Motzoi Shabbos are supposed to be this kind of restorative when your Neshama Yisera left. Okay, but he says you don't need it because your Neshama Yisera after Yom Tov doesn't go anywhere. He says in the same way, the Roshim Haritzui of Tisha B'av that came on Shabbos, that was there without any kelim. We didn't have any Maisa to access and grab hold of the light of Tisha B'av that comes into the world on the 9th of Av, which is on Shabbos. We are interacting with it. They agree with Rebbe. It's there, and that's why it's such a special Shabbos. He says, but nonetheless, unless we do something, it's going to leave, and it won't become part of us. He says, that's why, he says, they said, no, you should fast on Sunday. Because fasting on the 10th will enable you to hold on to that in a way that it won't leave you. That was what he said there. It's interesting. Rav Hutner used to say he didn't like it when people would say Yom Tov is over. He would say, I prefer to say Yom Tov has been added on, like the rings of a tree. When you look at a tree trunk, every year that it lives, there's another ring, right, in the circumference of the tree that's been added on. So this is a beautiful explanation here of what Rebbe's opinion was. And the Chachamim who agree to the basic idea that Shabbos is such a special Shabbos this year, not just because of the idea that even though halachically would think it should be Tisha B'av, Shabbos trumps it in halachic boker. It's the idea that you have Shabbos and you have all the positive inner core of Tisha B'av with you on that Shabbos, without the fasting. Okay, that's what's so unique about it. He says, with this, we can understand why it says in Maseches Tainis, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it was Motzoi Shabbos. Why? It says, because on Shabbos, you couldn't destroy the Beis HaMikdash. Because Churban comes with Midas Hadin. Nonetheless, the inside of the destruction was love, was Ahava. He says the common mashal, a father who has mercy on his child, and he has to give him a very bitter medicine to heal him. And the child is screaming and crying and trying to spit it out, and you're holding his mouth open and trying to get it down, and there's this tricky blow in his face so he swallows or something like this. And he says, and the father feels bad. The kid's crying and screaming and says he hates it. He feels it deep inside, the cries of his son, but he does not pay attention to that, even though he's getting torn apart. Because it's Tovas Abenu Refuoso, it's the good of his son. It's healing his son, and that's more important to him than the pain that he's going through. So was the Churban. He says, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu had not brought the Churban, they would have never repaired what they were doing wrong. And Avera Goreres Avera, and they would have kept on going down and down and down to a point that would be impossible to repair. So the Onish itself is Rachamim. The Churban itself is Rachamim. Okay, and it says, right, Rashi says that V'lo shama Hashem b'kolchem ki v'yochel asitem midas harachamim ki'ilu achzori. Right, it's as if you made Hashem's midas harachamim cruel, meaning you caused Hashem's rachamim to appear in the world in the guise, in the kelim of cruelty. Okay, but he says in reality, that's what it is. He said, pay attention when you're reading Megillah Seicha. Most of the Shemos of Hashem in Megillah Seicha are Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Shem Havaya, which is the name of Rachamim. That's your code, which is showing up there in Megillah Seicha. He says, therefore, he says, this is the idea of Chodesh Av, brings in Svarim that when the letters of the month are in order, and Av is the most in order of all months, that shows the idea of Rachamim. Right, the other months, Tishrei, where it goes in the opposite order, the Aleph Beis shows Din. He says, but this is the idea of what's happening. So you needed a Keli of Din for the Rachamim to be able to come into the world. That's why at the time of the Churban, it couldn't happen on Shabbos.
Okay. It's very difficult going to Tisha B'av to pinpoint a time and say, now I feel the love of the
Correct.
So it's in that way.
Amen. Right. It's in certain ways, and that brings us to the piece from the Siva Shalom I wanted to do, because in many ways we're not doing Tisha B'av the right way. Okay, we're again, people view it as this, and we must have adopted this from our Christian neighbors. This idea of self-flagellation, so to speak. I must cause myself pain because of the sins. And many people resent that because they say, listen, I wasn't alive then, I didn't do it. Why should I be skipping my coffee, right? Because of what, great-great-great-great-granddad did, or something like that. So this is not what it's about. Okay, again, what's interesting, all these things connect to the idea of Mashiach being born on Tisha B'av, right? Because that's the very point of it. The fact also in the calendar that the night of the Seder is the same night as Tisha B'av, because it's two sides of the same coin. They are both Hashem drawing us close to Him. On one way, B'tzeisi Mitzrayim, it was all the song and the music and all those things. B'tzeisi Yerushalayim is also the other side of the coin, but for the same purpose. Okay, let's do a short piece of Nesiva Shalom, the Slonim Rebbe, to see how he explains this problem that you're mentioning, right? Dealing with it. He quotes the Pri Haaretz of Menachem Mendel Vitebsk, one of the first Hasidic Rebbes who came to Eretz Yisrael. Talmid of the Baal Shem Tov. His shul still exists in Tveria. So he explains, he says in his Sefer Pri Haaretz, a great length, the idea of Avelus on the Churban, because he says, how can we be commanded to go into this mourning state? Again, in the Hasidic Outlook, he says the most difficult klipa is when a Jew is in atzvus, when a Jew is sad, right? That's the worst state to be in. It's a bechina of avodah zarah, right? They darshan the pasuk atzabeim kesef v'zohav, right? Their atzabim, their idols, are silver and gold, but from the lashon of atzvus. He said, how could it be that the Chazal were metaken this avelus on the Beis Hamikdash? So he says, he brings what Chazal say on the pasuk in Eicha, ki Hashem hogo al rov psho'eha. Hashem spoke, so to speak, about their many sins. So the Medrash says, Yochel al-Mogen, meaning you might think this was done for nothing. Right? Talmud Lomar, it says al-Rov Pshaya. No, it was done because they sinned a lot. So what does this mean? You would think it was done for nothing. Do we think it's done for nothing? So he says like this, Yochel al-Mogen means, do you think we're crying for nothing? Right? There used to be this ad for Shivas Regal. It was a picture of a smashed bottle and a puddle of whiskey on the floor, and the slogan said, have you ever seen a grown man cry? Right? In other words, this is the idea, the expression, you don't cry over spilled milk. Al-Mogen means for nothing. Are you crying for something that happened a gazillion years ago? It's over, it's done. Well, it's purposeless. Okay, and again, I'd mentioned the other times, that English translation that they call the Kotel the Wailing Wall has a connotation. Wailing is a type of crying over something that's gone, that's hopeless. It's a cry of despair. Okay, that's not the way we cry. He says the point is not to be crying about that we had a Beis Hamikdash and it's gone and that's terrible He said that would be for nothing. Okay, this David HaMelech said such a thing when one of his children died as a punishment. He said, Lama ze anitzom, ochal la'ashivo. Why should I fast? Is that going to bring him back? So he says, in the same way, if a Jew is just crying and going over, we lost this, we lost that, this was terrible, that was terrible. He says, Al rov psha'el. He says, that's not what you should be looking at. Look at the here and now. Look at your life, look at the state of our people. Get with the program. Get into action, right? The reason we're meant to have that type of life. We're meant to have a Beis HaMikdash. We're meant to have all those things. Why don't we? Not because Hashem destroyed it and it's gone. No, al rov psha'el. Because right now you're not getting your act together in order to have that. That's the crying that should be. It's a crying of yearning and wanting to be able to do it. Right? When Chazal said, Kol shelo nivne Beis HaMikdash biyomav kilu nechrav biyomav. If it's not built in your days, it's as if it's destroyed. So again, the Hashem is brought down. He said that's too depressing because there were so many great generations before us and it wasn't built. So how in the world is it going to be built in a generation of people like us? So he says, no, biyomav means every generation builds their piece of the Beis HaMikdash. He says, if we do our piece, it gets closer and closer every time. So you should be focusing on that. That's the focus of the Avelis. Ikar b'chilosa v'yaso ve'evlo shel Yehudi al churban al rov psha'el. Okay, so a person's going to ask, wait a second, why is the Kinnis so full of stuff from the past? Why is it all going on there? Because a person needs to know what they're supposed to have in order to get pumped up to try and transform it. There used to be this, I never really read many of these management books, I don't like that many of them, but there was this cute little one called The 1 Minute Manager. Years ago it was a big hit. This short book, and it has this employee speaking to this great manager guru, and he comes to him and he says, I have a problem. And the manager says, no you don't. He says, what do you mean? He says, you have a complaint. He says, a problem is when you're in point A and you want to get to point B. Okay, then you have a problem. How do I get from A to B? You're coming to tell me, I hate it in A. I don't like A. A is no good for me. That's not a problem. That's a complaint. Okay, so the Avelis on Tisha B'av is not complaining. This is terrible. This is horrible. The question is, we're in point A. We're supposed to be in point B. How do we get there? That's what's really happening. Okay, so he says, and this is why he says there's no Avelis on the Churban on Shabbos. Because Shabbos, the Ikar Avoda is with Simcha. Okay? Because there's a pasuk in Malos of Yom Simchaschem V'Madechem, even though there isn't the same halachic mitzvah of Simcha like on Yontif, B'Yom Simchaschem, Rashi brings down, that's Elu HaShabbosas. Okay? So the Avodas on Shabbos are really of Asay Tov. That's why there's no Avelis on Shabbos. He says, even the Avelis of looking at the sins that we have currently now that are preventing us from progressing, you don't do that on Shabbos either. He brings a Hasidic Perush. I think in the name of the Chidush Yarim, Chazal said, on Shabbos you're supposed to look at it ki'ilu kol malachta chasuya, as if all your work is done. So they said that means even your spiritual work. Shabbos is not a day to be saying, oh, and I don't know any Torah, I don't do this mitzvah, I do this aver. That's not for Shabbos. That might be for Erev Shabbos, to clear up your act before. On Shabbos, you sit down at Kodesh Baruch Hu's table, and you sing, and you eat, and you enjoy. What about all the stuff that you're doing wrong or that you haven't been doing right? That's not for now. Okay? So therefore, that aspect of the Avelis on the Beis HaMikdash isn't done either. What we do accomplish is getting closer to it through Simcha. Right? He brings the idea of when you visit a chola, you visit a sick person on Shabbos, you say, Shabbos hi milizok u'refuah karov levo. We don't cry out on Shabbos. The refuah is close and going to come. And Rashi says that giving cover to Shabbos by not being mitztayer brings the Yeshua. Okay? That is particularly it. That by maintaining your simcha on Shabbos and not thinking about the tzara, that itself brings the Yeshua. So on the Tisha B'av that comes out on Shabbos, by thinking only about those positive aspects and not letting that take down the simcha of Shabbos, that brings it closer. And that brings the Beis HaMikdash in that way. Okay? Even the idea of thinking about all the things that we did wrong are not done. Okay, so therefore he says, right, the Avelus is not memories from the past. It's not nostalgia, right? It's just like any of our Yom Tovim are not just memories. Oh, once something great happened to us. It's a real interaction and process that happens on that day. And the bottom line of the Avelus is the yearning for what is going to come. He says it comes me'olam habinyan. It's from the world of construction, not from the world of destruction. Like Shir HaShirim. If you look at Shir HaShirim, Rashi brings in the beginning, Shir HaShirim is the song of Am Yisrael in the Golus. And that is viewed as the greatest love song that exists between Am Yisrael and Hashem. Because in the song it goes through the love that was, it goes through the separation that happened, but it goes through the fact that it's going to come back and the yearning for it to come back. Okay, so that's what's happening there at the time. The fact that we know that it will happen is something that also gives us strength. It's not a question mark. The fact that the nevuahs are there and the fact that we talk about this all the time throughout, that gives us the strength at this time. If a person felt maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, you just don't have the strength to go for it. But it's there. We say in Eicha, right? We say, Eini yoda mayim ki rochak mimeni merachim meshiv nafshi. My eyes pour water because that consolation which can return my nefesh is rochak mimeni. It's far away, but it's going to happen. It's there, okay? And knowing that, just I'll finish with a story. We didn't have a story tonight, just as a small mushal for this. The Kapishnitzer Rebbe did so much. He got to America, helping the Jews try to escape Europe, helping the Jews who made it out after the war. And there was one man who came into him, and he was a wreck. He was a wreck. What had happened? He found out that his wife survived the war, and she made it to Ellis Island, but she was sick with some kind of disease, and she may have to be, they were going to send her back or quarantine her someplace far away, and they didn't know what would happen. But my grandmother also said she had something in her eyes, and they also gave her problems in Ellis Island. You know, they didn't want to bring diseases in there. And the man was a survivor. And he was saying, if I can't be with my wife, you know, that's it, it's over, I can't. And the Rebbe told him, I'm telling you, within a month she's going to be with you and it's all going to be okay. I promise. And the guy went out really happy. So the Gabbai, who really hadn't heard the Rebbe say things like that before, he said, hey, how did you do that? How did you promise that? I mean, what if she doesn't come in a month? He said, if she doesn't come in a month, nice Rebbe. So I'm going to have to retire as a Rebbe, right? And I saw one nusach that he said, then I'll have more time to learn and daven. People won't come bother me anymore because they'll see I'm a washout, right? But then he went into a corner and he davened to Hashem and he says, Hashem, please don't bring me to embarrassment, to shame, right? Promised in your name. They said, but why did you do it? He says, because the person was barely surviving. I promised him that. He lit up. For a month now, he's going to be alive, feeling confident. His wife is coming. He's feeling good. It's worth it for that. Here, the promise that came to us. What happened? I believe that they said it all happened okay, as I remember it. Yeah, happy ending. Okay, but here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us it's going to happen. And, you know, there's no question of it. And that should be giving us strength even now. And strength for the yearning. This is what's there behind Tisha B'av. And this is the special Shabbos that we're supposed to really savor and take advantage of. All the way up into Shalosh, where the halacha says that you can have a Suda Kisuda Shlomo B'Shaita. Right? If you look at Shlomo Melech Suda in Tanakh, that was quite a barbecue. Right? And they said even people usually don't have meat and wine at Shalosh can have meat and wine. Right? Because that's the aspect of Tisha B'av that we're involved with on this Shabbos. It's Hashem looking forward to the Yontiv of Tisha B'av. That'll be a Yontiv whatever day it comes out then, and not just on Shabbos. Have a wonderful